Hello, this is Patrice, and for the next hour, I'll be reading from the May 19th issue of the front section of of the New York Times on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. IRS must drop audits of Trump and family. As part of the Justice Department's compensation fund deal, officials vowed not to pursue any matters, including those involving President Trump's tax returns that are pending. This article is by Alan Feuer and Andrew Durin. The Justice Department on Tuesday expanded the agreement it reached this week with President Trump to resolve his extraordinary lawsuit against the Internal Revenue Service to include a provision that would bar the agency from pursuing tax claims against the president, his family, or his businesses. In a one-page document signed by Acting Attorney General Todd Blanche and quietly posted on the department's website, officials vowed not to pursue any matters, including those involving Mr. Trump's tax returns that are currently pending. The new provision was released just one day after Mr. Trump agreed to drop his suit in exchange for the creation of a $1.8 billion compensation fund for people he believes were wronged by federal investigations or prosecutions. The fund drew repeated criticism from Democrats when Mr. Blanche appeared before a Senate Appropriations Subcommittee for a hearing on Tuesday morning. The New York Times reported last week that Mr. Trump's talks with the Justice Department and the IRS had included a measure calling on the IRS to drop any audits of the president, his relatives, or businesses. But that provision did not appear in the 9-page agreement laying out the terms to dismiss the lawsuit, which the department released Monday. In January, Mr. Trump, along with two of his sons and the Trump family business, sued the Internal Revenue Service for at least $10 billion over the leak of their tax returns during the president's first term. The Trumps argued that the IRS should have done more to prevent a former contractor from disclosing tax information to the New York Times and ProPublica. Neither the Justice Department nor the IRS immediately responded to requests seeking comment. The top lawyer at the Treasury, Brian Morrissey, resigned on Monday after the Justice Department announced the settlement with Trump. Justice Department officials have in part defended the creation of the Anti-Weaponization Fund by pointing to the fact that Mr. Trump and his families will not be paid by it. But protection from audit could be quite remunerative for Mr. Trump. In 2024, the Times reported that a loss in an IRS audit could cost Mr. Trump more than $100 million. It is unclear if that examination has concluded or if Mr. Trump, his family members, or affiliated entities are under other audits. IRS procedures call for the mandatory audit of the president's tax returns annually. Federal law prohibits the president, vice president, and other executive officers from instructing the IRS to start or stop specific audits, but that broad prohibition does appear to include a carve-out for the Attorney General. Iran war exposes shortcomings in U.S. military-industrial base. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth is taking on a problem that the Pentagon and Congress have tried and mostly failed to address for years. By Julian E. Barnes. When he was Defense Secretary, Robert M. Gates rallied against weapons that did too much and cost too much throughout his time in two presidential administrations. He denounced weapons that offered a 99% solution but took years to build and called for a new generation of arms that were 75% solutions but could be produced more cheaply in months. Almost 2 decades later, little has changed. Patriot interceptor missiles can take up to 36 months and $4 million to build. So far in the Iran war, the U.S. military has fired more than 1,200 of them. Some were used to shoot down $35,000 Shahed drones, which Iran can churn out at a rate of at least 200 a month. The war and the quick pace with which the United States has burned through weapons has brought Mr. Gates' old critique to the current day and exposed deep shortcomings in America's military-industrial base and weapon procurement systems. Ukraine is going to produce 7 million drones this year, Mr. Gates said in an interview. Come on, why can't we do that? The Pentagon and Congress have tried, and mostly failed, to address the problem for years. Now Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth is taking it on. The main difference is that while many defense secretaries, including Mr. Gates, argued for doing more with less money, Mr. Hegseth is pushing for a $1.5 trillion budget, the largest military funding proposal in modern U.S. history. But experts say there are fundamental problems with how the military designs and builds weaponry that money alone might not be able to fix. The Pentagon needs to demonstrate real behavior and cultural change, said Rachel Hoff, the policy director at the Ronald Reagan Institute. They have stood up so many new offices and announced new strategies, but ultimately, if there aren't real changes on contracting and acquisition, it's all just rhetoric. There is plenty of blame to go around, but essentially, the Pentagon is a finicky customer that buys in small batches and never achieves economies of scale, said Mackenzie Eaglin, a military expert at the conservative-leaning American Enterprise Institute. The equipment the Pentagon buys, not just ships and planes, but also munitions, can take several years to build. When a war starts, Ms. Eaglin said, there's no quick fix to increase production. The system has no slack because it isn't needed until wartime, or so the short-sighted thinking goes in government, she said. At the Defense Department, officials say they are ready for change. Mr. Hegseth has called for an 85% solution in weapons acquisition and criticized large defense contractors and the Pentagon bureaucracy, echoing Mr. Gates' complaints. Armed with a potentially huge increase in spending, Mr. Hegseth's changes focus on prioritizing commercial sources, pushing for multiple suppliers, and demanding that contractors improve their manufacturing capacity. So far, his Pentagon has expanded the number of multi-year contracts aimed at tripling or quadrupling munitions production. And senior officials said they are finding ways to bring in new defense tech companies, eliminating bureaucratic barriers that have hindered them. As we increase production of exquisite systems, we are actively looking for innovative, low-cost solutions that can complement our high-end munitions, said Sean Parnell, the Pentagon spokesman. By driving competition and new technology into the fold, we're ensuring the industrial base expands to ensure everlasting battlefield overmatch for our warfighters. Inside the administration, the shortfall in interceptors and the struggles to produce weapons fast enough has prompted worries that adversaries could be emboldened and that allies could change their calculations, concerned the United States cannot defend them as effectively as they had thought. The U.S. Special Operations Forces raid that captured President Nicolas Maduro of Venezuela early this year gave the military an air of invincibility. According to American intelligence agencies, officials in Russia and China assessed that they could not have executed that operation, but the war in Iran has made the United States appear less formidable. Struggles with the munition stockpile are not new. According to a 2010 Army history of the munitions industrial base, the United States has undergone boom and bust cycles of arms production since World War I, as the Defense Department activated ammunition plants for a conflict only to decommission them shortly after hostilities ended. This article does continue on for quite several more minutes, so if you would like to hear it in its entirety, please call the radio reading service at 716-821-5555. A member of staff will read the entire article to you. Bond yields hit highest level since 2007 as inflation fears set in. The 30-year U.S. Treasury yield hasn't been this high since the lead up to the global financial crisis. Across Europe and Asia, yields are also elevated. This article is by Joe Renison. Bond markets convulsed on Tuesday, pushing the rates on U.S. Treasuries to levels not seen since the global financial crisis nearly 20 years ago, as investors grew increasingly anxious about rising inflation because of the war in Iran. The yield on the 30-year Treasury note rose to 5.18% on Tuesday, on course to close at its highest level since 2007. Bond yields move inversely to prices. The rising rates, which are pushing up borrowing costs for governments, homeowners, and businesses, could be a crucial pressure point for the Trump administration as it continues to pursue its campaign against Iran, which has pushed up oil prices worldwide. The last time President Trump faced such turmoil in the Treasury market was after he announced in April last year that he would raise tariffs on nearly every U.S. trading partner. The steepening rates were cited as a primary reason that Mr. Trump later backed down from many of his most draconian proposals. This time, investors across the world are becoming increasingly concerned about the fallout from the months-long conflict in the Middle East, where, despite a ceasefire between the United States and Iran, efforts to find a lasting peace deal have stalled. The yields on 30-year bonds in Canada, Germany, France, Spain, Portugal, the Netherlands, and Switzerland all traded at their 12-month high on Tuesday. Across the rest of Europe and Asia, the long yield was also elevated. In Britain, the tumult in the government bond market is even more extreme. A leadership crisis facing Prime Minister Keir Starmer has helped push the country's 30-year bond to its highest level since 1998. Japan's 30-year bond yield sits at 4.13%, the highest it has ever been, as rising energy prices strain the country's already struggling economy. Bold investors around the world are focused on the continued blockade of the Strait of Hormuz, the vital shipping lane that the war had funneled roughly a fifth of the world's oil supply, predominantly to Asia and some parts of Europe. In the United States, the impact of higher oil prices was reflected in a series of inflation reports last week showing consumer and producer prices both rising at their fastest pace in several years. Another factor weighing on the Treasury market is last weekend's summit between Mr. Trump and China's leader Xi Jinping. Investors hope that the much-anticipated meeting would result in China's help with ending the war in Iran were dashed. In Europe, world leaders met on Tuesday to discuss ways to tamper inflation, though many in the group were upset about a U.S. decision this week to further ease sanctions on Russian seaborne oil in an attempt to bring down global fuel costs. Some European officials said the move rewarded Russia while its aggression in Ukraine continued. I think there is just a lot of fear out there right now and a collective hesitancy to step in front of the sell-off, said Vail Hartman, a U.S. rate strategist at BMO Capital Markets, noting concerns that yields could continue to move higher. Unlike during last year's tariff turmoil, Mr. Trump appears less willing to back down over Iran, analysts say. The economy is otherwise in good shape, underpinned by the growth of artificial intelligence and blockbuster corporate profits. The stock market has risen for 7 consecutive weeks, hitting record highs along the way. The rising rates are also starting to add pressure on stocks. On Tuesday, the S&P 500 fell about 0.7%, its third consecutive daily drop as investors awaited developments in the tenuous ceasefire in the Iran war. When asked on Tuesday how long Iran had to return to the negotiating table, Mr. Trump said 2 or 3 days, maybe Friday, Saturday, Sunday, maybe early next week, a limited period of time. The climbing Treasury yields could complicate Mr. Trump's other economic priorities like jump-starting the stalled housing market. The 10-year Treasury yield, which underpins borrowing costs for mortgages, has also surged higher since the start of the war with Iran. That yield has risen roughly 0.75 of a percentage point since the war began to 4.67%, its highest level since the start of 2025. The average 30-year mortgage rate has risen to 6.36% from below 6% before the war, according to data from the housing agency Freddie Mac. Some of the increasing Treasury yields are driven by anticipation that the Fed will potentially need to raise the short-dated interest rate controls to try to slow inflation. These expectations are increasing even with the appointment of the new Fed chair, Kevin Warsh, whom Trump picked with hopes of lowering rates. Before the war began, investors had expected the Fed to cut rates at least 0.5 percentage point by January. Now they have lowered those expectations to a 0.25 point rise based on prices in the interest rate futures markets. There is a feeling that this is going to get worse before it gets better, said Joseph Pertel, a portfolio manager at Neuberger Berman, adding that the market is pricing in some kind of premium for that uncertainty. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the front section of the New York Times on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. As a weakened Putin follows Trump to Beijing, Iran war offers an opening. With the upheaval in the Persian Gulf disrupting oil and gas supplies, Russia is looking to deepen its energy ties to China. President Vladimir Putin of Russia arrived in Beijing on Tuesday for a state visit in a position of relative weakness. His army is struggling to move in Ukraine. His seat of power, Moscow, has been increasingly vulnerable to Ukrainian drones. Russia's economy is under severe strain. More Russians are growing tired of what increasingly looks like a fruitless and endless war. Even in better times for Moscow, its relationship with Beijing has been defined by economic imbalance. China has massive leverage and can dictate exactly what it wants from this menu of bilateral cooperation, said Alexander Guberv, the director of the Carnegie Russia Eurasia Center in Berlin. Still, Russia is not content being relegated to junior partner to China. Its nuclear arsenal, far larger than Beijing's, could make it an important ally in any superpower conflict, including over Taiwan. The invasion of Ukraine has positioned Moscow as a leader in an emerging non-Western world order supported by Beijing. And then there is the opening provided by the war against Iran, waged by the United States and Israel. 5 days after an architect of that conflict, President Trump left Beijing at the end of his own state visit. Mr. Putin will join Chinese leader Xi Jinping for a day of meetings on Wednesday. The upheaval that Mr. Trump has caused in the Persian Gulf has disrupted energy supplies to China, and Russia has promoted itself as a reliable alternative. Russian officials hope to leverage the Middle East crisis to deepen energy ties with Beijing, including by moving ahead with a stalled pipeline project. Ivan Timofeev, the Director General of the Russian International Affairs Council, a think tank co-founded by the country's foreign ministry, said the Middle East conflict showed how Russia could mitigate for China the risks associated with logistics and the Persian Gulf. Russia retains a crucial strategic role here for China in the event of such escalations, Mr. Timofeev said on Friday during a news conference in Moscow. By hosting Mr. Putin just days after Mr. Trump's visit, Mr. Xi is tending to his relationship with his most important strategic partner and casting China as an indispensable global power. Since December, Mr. Xi has welcomed to Beijing the leaders of France, Canada, Britain, Germany, and the United States. In his summit with Mr. Trump, Mr. Xi argued that China and the United States were now peer powers and that they should avoid prioritizing competition. Mr. Putin has been working to position himself advantageously between Mr. Trump and Mr. Xi. The Russian leader has tried to cultivate Mr. Trump, seeking his help in securing a favorable resolution to the invasion of Ukraine and reaping the benefits of renewed business relations after the war. Mr. Putin's ties to Mr. Xi, however, run far deeper. The Russian leader has worked to develop a well-documented bond with his Chinese counterpart, calling him his dear friend and best bosom friend. Mr. Xi is expected to reaffirm that closeness on Wednesday. Both sides will seize this opportunity to continue to promote the development of China-Russia relationships to a deeper and higher level, injecting more stability and positive energy into the world, a Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesman, Zhao Jiakun, said on Monday. Mr. Putin struck a similar note in an address published by the Kremlin on Tuesday ahead of the visit. The close strategic relationship between Russia and China plays a major stabilizing role globally, he said. Without allying against anyone, we seek peace and universal prosperity. Mr. Xi sees a like-minded leader frustrated by American dominance of the global order, said Julian Gurwitz, a senior director for China and Taiwan affairs at the National Security Council in the Biden administration. While Mr. Trump lavished praise on the Chinese leader during his visit to Beijing, Xi's embrace of Putin this week should be a reminder that Beijing's closest international partners are connected by their shared emphasis on resistance to the United States, Mr. Gurwin said. Excuse me, that should be Mr. Gurwitz. Once again, this article is quite long. I've maybe read about half of it. So, again, to hear it in its entirety, the number to call is 716-821-5555. Manager at Trump's New Jersey Golf Club helped plan reflecting pool repairs. David Schutzenhofer, a Trump Organization employee, reached out to one of the vendors the local government later hired for the iconic site near the Lincoln Memorial, documents show. This article is by David A. Farenthold and Maxine Joselo. The general manager of President Trump's golf club in Bedminster, New Jersey, has offered suggestions to guide the renovation of the Lincoln Memorial reflecting pool and helped recruit one of the contractors for the job, according to the federal documents and a government spokeswoman. The manager, David Schutzenhofer, has run the Trump National Golf Club in Bedminster since 2006, is a private citizen with no known training in engineering or architecture. An Interior Department spokeswoman said Mr. Schutzenhofer had advised the government on the repair project without becoming a temporary government employee. Had he become one, he would have been required to take the ethics training and pledge to avoid conflicts of interest. Mr. Schutzenhofer is unpaid and is volunteering his time to offer suggestions on this project because he is an American patriot, the spokeswoman, Katie Martin, said in an email. She called Mr. Schutzenhofer a world-renowned leader in the hospitality industry and said he did not direct any federal contracts. The department did not provide details about Mr. Schutzenhofer's involvement in the project. Neither Mr. Schutzenhofer nor the Trump Organization responded to requests for comment. In response to questions, Taylor Rogers, a White House spokeswoman, said in an email, "Thanks to President Trump, the reflecting pool will be restored to its proper glory." Mr. Trump previously took credit for picking one of the contractors repairing the reflecting pool, saying the company had worked on the swimming pool at his golf club in Sterling, Virginia, but the president later reversed himself, saying he did not know the firm. The reflecting pool is not a swimming pool, and repairing it is not an easy task. The iconic site has been plagued for decades by leaks and algae blooms, which various administrations have been unable to permanently fix. The Trump administration set out to renovate it this spring, paying one contractor to waterproof its floor and another to install an improved water purification system. The project has already cost much more than Mr. Trump said it would, and Interior Department staff members have raised questions about the quality and speed of the waterproofing work. The involvement of Mr. Schutzenhofer has not previously been reported. Emails obtained by the New York Times showed that he was playing a major role in late January, months before any contracts were awarded. Those emails indicate that Mr. Schutzenhofer spoke on January 28th with Al George, the chief executive of an Ohio-based company called Greenwater Services, about the prospect that the government would hire the company to bring mobile, trailer-based filtration systems, seemingly a temporary stopgap, to treat the pool's water. Mr. Schutzenhofer told the company that he would discuss its plan with the National Park Service, which is part of the Interior Department, the emails show. Then, in mid-February, Mr. Schutzenhofer forwarded an email from Greenwater to a Park Service official with a note saying, "Let's jump on a call to review this." About 2 months later, in mid-April, Greenwater received a $1.7 million no-bid contract to install a permanent purification system, at the pool. Mr. George, Greenwater's chief executive, did not respond to questions about his interactions with Mr. Schutzenhofer. He previously declined to comment on that contract. The Interior Department declined to say if Mr. Schutzenhofer had signed any kind of ethics pledges before beginning his work. Federal contracting specialists typically sign conflict of interest agreements that require them not to use the information for personal gain, said Philip Lee, a government contracts lawyer at the law firm of McCarter and English. "If there's nothing on paper, there's no checks and balances," said Mr. Lee, who previously worked as a contracting officer at the Interior Department. In April, the Trump administration also gave a no-bid contract worth $13.1 million to a Virginia-based firm called Atlantic Industrial Coatings to waterproof and paint the reflecting pool. Mr. Trump had initially said the work would cost $1.8 million. As part of that contract, Atlantic Industrial Coatings is spreading a waterproofing material called Rhino Pipeliner 5000 across the pool's concrete slabs. An added tint is giving the pool a blue hue that Mr. Trump has called American flag blue. That was a departure from the Park Service's previous plans for fixing the pool. The agency had called for sealing leaky joints between the slabs, but not waterproofing the 8-inch thick concrete slabs themselves. Kevin Grice, the Park Service official overseeing the National Mall, said in a court filing this week that the idea had come from the administration, had not been previously considered by his team. Government documents seen by the Times provide more detail. They identify the source of the plan as an advisor to the administration, whom they refer to as David S. It was unclear if that reference to Mr. Schutzenhofer, if that was a reference to Mr. Schutzenhofer. Neither the Interior Department nor the White House responded to specific questions about that contract. Interior Department employees have recently noticed bubbles and small holes in one of the layers meant to waterproof the pool. They have also questioned whether the repair work will be finished by Friday, the government's contractual deadline. Mr. Trump said on Saturday that the renovations were progressing as planned, though he appears to have changed the completion date. Looking really good. Should be completed before the 4th of July, our target date, he wrote on a post on social media, adding, "I've made this much larger job than originally contemplated for purposes of beauty and a much longer life." One of the owners of Atlantic Industrial Coatings, Curtis E. Wood, previously declined to comment on the company's work on the pool. He did not respond to questions about Mr. Schutzenhofer's role. Mr. Schutzenhofer is not the first veteran of the Trump National Golf Club in Bedminster to advise the administration. Edward Russo, the chairman of the House Environmental Advisory Task Force, is a former consultant on environmental compliance for the golf club. Last week, a nonprofit group called the Cultural Landscape Foundation filed a lawsuit seeking to stop the reflection pool renovations. The suit argues that the administration is harming its reflective quality and replacing the serene, character-defining gray basin with a vivid blue paint reminiscent of a swimming pool. The administration fired back in a court filing on Monday evening, writing their whole theory of the case wrongly assumes, based on a series of inaccurate news articles and satirical social media posts, that the reflecting pool will ultimately look like a swimming pool that you see at a resort or theme park. That's not true. A hearing in the case is scheduled for Thursday in U.S. District Court in Washington. Sean Duffy to testify amid questions about road trip YouTube series. The Transportation Secretary's reality show-like series is meant to commemorate the nation's 250th birthday, but has faced questions about its funding. By Caron Dimerjian. Transportation Secretary Sean P. Duffy is expected to face a grilling when he appears on Capitol Hill on Tuesday afternoon amid questions about whether he violated ethics standards while filming a YouTube series featuring his family taking an all-expenses-paid road trip. The Senate Appropriations Subcommittee hearing is the first of two Mr. Duffy has scheduled for this week. It is intended to go over the Transportation Department's proposed budget for the next fiscal year and to review progress on initiatives such as Mr. Duffy's pledge to modernize air traffic control. But scrutiny of the Duffy's family forthcoming Great American Road Trip series, which was paid for by a new nonprofit funded by hefty contributions from companies regulated by the Transportation Department, has become a major issue for the Cabinet Secretary. Several Democrats have raised concern about the funding of the reality show style series, which begins to air in June. Toyota, Boeing, United, and Shell are all among the companies that have donated to a nonprofit that is underwriting the project, which the Transportation Department has said is part of its official efforts to mark the 250th anniversary of the United States founding. The nonprofit is not required to disclose its donors, and a government watchdog called the department's Inspector General to look into the matter. So far, Republicans have not joined the pile-on. Mr. Duffy and his representatives say the project was cleared by the department's ethics and budget officials. In a memorandum of agreement, the nonprofit and the department stated that the private funds, which covered the Duffy's gas, car rentals, hotels, and other production costs, would be treated as a gift to the department. The memo said that the nonprofit would receive no preferential treatment from the department on regulatory matters in exchange for its participation. But those terms do not apply to the nonprofit's corporate donors who are not signatories, nor did it explain how the funds that covered the expenses accrued by Mr. Duffy's wife, Rachel Campos Duffy, a Fox News anchor, and their 9 children counted as official department business. Mr. Duffy may face similar questions about other areas in which his actions have blended the line between his official and personal or corporate ventures, particularly around the national 250th birthday. Mr. Duffy may also face questions over how the department has addressed staffing shortages in air traffic control, a long-running crisis that came to a sharp focus after a 2025 mid-air collision outside Ronald Reagan National Airport near Washington that killed 67. Mr. Duffy has made efforts to improve flying safety a centerpiece of his department leadership. But last week, the Federal Aviation Administration, an agency housed in the Transportation Department, revised down estimates of how many controllers the system needed to be fully staffed, arguing that it could close gaps with more efficient scheduling. On Monday, the National Air Traffic Controllers Association said the change was based on a flawed study. Mr. Duffy may also be challenged about his department's efforts to stop states from issuing trucking licenses to immigrants for terms longer than their federal work permits. It has said it will withhold highway funds from those states. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the front section of the New York Times on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Amid global turmoil, Trump takes a moment for the thing I do best in life. President Trump showed off the construction on his ballroom project, providing a deeper look at the things that matter to him. This article is by Luke Broadwater. At a time when his poll numbers are sagging, the economy is sputtering, and the war he launched in Iran simply will not end, President Trump spent Tuesday morning showing off his skills in the profession he feels most comfortable with: real estate. Mr. Trump summoned reporters to the White House to give them a peek at the giant hole where the West Wing once stood before he had that part of the complex torn down to make way for a $400 million, 90,000 square foot ballroom. We have a little breakfast for you, Mr. Trump said as White House staff members laid out bacon and egg breakfast sandwiches and Cokes. While the president held court, construction workers busied themselves behind him, hammering and banging and beginning to erect columns to support the weight of the ballroom. Mr. Trump attacked his critics, called Democrats, and discussed the latest in the Iran war. But the president also made clear that discussing the ballroom was when he felt most at ease, and that real estate development business, which Mr. Trump entered following in the footsteps of his father, was where he felt most talented. I'm a really good builder, he said. The thing I do best in life is build. It was a glimpse of the mindset of a president who has increasingly come under criticism for being out of touch with the things that Americans are most concerned about, the economy for one, and seeing an end to a deeply unpopular and expensive war. I don't really have enough time to explain it to people, Mr. Trump said about the complexities of the war and the dangers of Iran having a nuclear weapon. He said he was too busy getting it done, but on Tuesday he had ample time to go over his design choices for the ballroom. If you take a look at this section, Mr. Trump said, pointing to the different styles in the ballroom's design and describing how they were inspired by Greek or Roman architecture. This is a Greek, more or less. It comes out of Greece. This is the ultimate facade for Greece. This face is the Treasury building. This face is a different facade. That's Rome. Then he began to detail the security features involved in the project. Mr. Trump said it would include a secure bunker extending 6 floors into the earth. The bunker, the president had said, will have bomb shelters, very major medical facilities, such as a hospital, and the latest secure communication methods and defenses against bioweapons. It's a shield, Mr. Trump said of the ballroom, which he added would be made out of impenetrable steel and also impenetrable glass. Congressional funding for the security portions of the project are in doubt. Republicans have attempted to include a $1 billion for security at the White House, including the ballroom project, in a filibuster-proof budget bill, but that provision has fallen afoul of Senate rules. Even so, Mr. Trump said wealthy business donors would fund the construction of the ballroom. It's a gift from me and from incredible, successful companies and patriots, and they put up close to 400 million, he said. In his second term, Mr. Trump has been pushing ahead at the breakneck pace to remake Washington in his own style. Mr. Trump is in court fighting to close the John F. Kennedy Center for the Performing Arts, which was renamed the Trump Kennedy Center, for a major renovation. He has proposed building a 250-foot triumphal arch near Washington's border with Arlington, Virginia. He has proposed a large project to create a National Garden of American Heroes. Next to that is a golf course that Mr. Trump wants to make into a luxury destination. The president also said he was fixing up the water fountains in Washington. Many of the projects, including the ballroom and the plans for a National Garden of Heroes, have grown in size and scale as Mr. Trump has become more interested in them. He has begun a renovation of the Lincoln Memorial reflecting pool, which is costing 7 times more than the president originally said it would. I got so into it. I've upgraded it like you wouldn't believe, Mr. Trump said of his work on the pool. I'm doing all the walkways outside. I'm doing it properly. But it's a much bigger jump. But you see, it's happening now. It's going to be beautiful. It's going to be waterproof. It's going to be reflecting again. Democrats and other critics of the president's actions argue that he's become too focused on construction projects and redecorating the White House while in office, distracting him from the needs of Americans. It's a sad thing, Mr. Trump said of those who have criticized his renovations. I want to see Washington be beautiful. To me, it's very important. At another point, he said of his ballroom, I'm a great builder and I build beautiful projects. There will never be anything like this. Before he left, the president made sure the reporters saw the breakfast sandwiches that had been laid out for them. Enjoy it, Mr. Trump said as he walked back into the White House. Eat it before it gets cold. A fearful phone call and a frantic search preceded mosque shooting. San Diego police arrived to find 3 people dead. Nearby, they found 2 teenagers, the attackers, dead in a car, the violence shattered an idyllic Southern California city. The frantic mother's call came in at 9:40. This article is by Tim Arango, Christina Morales, Candice Reed, and Chelsea Rose Marcius. The frantic mother's call came in at 9:42 a.m. on Monday. Her son was missing. That wasn't all, she told the San Diego police. Several guns were gone, and so was her car, and her 17-year-old might have a friend with him. The police were alarmed and began a desperate hunt for the 2 teenagers. They were somewhere in California's second largest city, a sprawling community of 1.4 million people, nested amid palms and purple jacarandas. A license plate reader seemed to show them near a mall, and officers rushed there. Then they converged on the high school one of the teenagers attended. Those turned out to be the wrong places. The teens' target was a mosque, the police said. They shot and killed 3 people there, including a security guard who worked for the mosque and whose actions, police said, likely saved lives. And then the teens killed themselves, the police said. The grounds of the Islamic Center of San Diego, the largest mosque in San Diego, include a school. I'll tell you what got me, Chief Scott Wall of the San Diego Police Department said in a news conference. Watching kids come running out, just thankful to be alive. The shooting came amid increased threats and acts of violence against religious institutions in America, fueled by the wars in the Middle East. In March, a man attacked a synagogue outside Detroit with a truck before he died in a confrontation with security guards. The growing threats have prompted increased security at mosques, synagogues, and churches across America. In the hours after the attack, a grim and familiar American ritual played out. Politicians and other leaders condemned the violence, while officials in Los Angeles and other major cities in the United States said the police officers would increase patrols at religious sites. No one should ever fear for their safety while attending prayers or studying in an elementary school, said Tahsin Nizam, the executive director of the San Diego chapter of the Council on American Islamic Relations, which reported more civil rights complaints by Muslims in 2025 than in any other year since 1996. In San Diego, officers were dispatched to the mosque just before noon Monday. Drop what you're doing, they were told. People were reporting gunfire. The first officers on the scene found 3 dead men just outside the entrance to the house of worship. As dozens of officers rushed inside, breaching doors and going room to room, a fresh round of gunshots was reported a couple blocks away. There, police found a landscape worker who had been shot at. He was unhurt, police said, but a bullet may have ricocheted off the helmet he wore. A few minutes later, the police discovered a vehicle in the street holding two dead suspects, one 17, the other 18. The teens, police said, had shot themselves after unleashing carnage at the mosque. In the late morning, as the haze typical of a May in Southern California was burning off, Vanessa Chavez was fixing herself an early lunch when she heard 4 gunshots, one after another, coming from the direction of the nearby mosque. She raced to another room to get a better view and saw a security guard get hit by at least 2 gunshots, she said. Children playing outside were quickly herded in. Soon, her neighborhood, normally quiet, a quiet leafy area shaded by eucalyptus trees and blooming jacarandas, I think, resembled a war zone, with scores of officers, SWAT teams, and a helicopter circling overhead. As reporters and officials gathered at a park a block from the mosque, the building's entrance was taped off and quiet, but through the gates a covered body could be seen lying on the ground. Now seeing that he lost his life, it was very brave of him, Mrs. Chavez, 46, said in an interview, referring to the security guard. Arturo Gonzalez, a pro-immigrant activist in San Diego, was near the mosque when the shooting began and soon after saw panicked parents looking for their children. At first, they weren't letting them in, said Mr. Gonzalez, 23. Parents were crying. It was really scary. And I actually shouted at a police officer to let one mother in, and they finally did. Chief Wall, praised the slain guard as a hero. I think it's fair to say his actions were heroic and undoubtedly saved lives today, he said. As agents from the FBI and the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives rushed Monday afternoon to assist local police, some clues were starting to emerge. Investigators began executing search warrants on Monday afternoon. Chief Wall said investigators were collecting footage from the many security cameras at the mosque. There's going to be a tremendous amount of information and details that we're going to try and sort and put this puzzle back together again, he said. Investigators recovered anti-Islamic writing in the car where the suspects were found dead, according to 2 law enforcement officials briefed on the matter, who requested anonymity because they were not authorized to share details publicly. The words hate speech were written on one of the guns used in the attack. Chief Wall said investigators had not uncovered any threats toward a specific place. Still, there was definitely hate rhetoric involved, Chief Wall said. The Islamic Center is not just a place of worship, but also a community center, a place for people to gather. There is a library and a busy schedule of classes unrelated to religion, such as smoking cessation groups, said Linda Sarsauer, a Brooklyn-based activist and advocate for Muslims who has visited the place many times. She is friends with the center's imam, Taya Hassan. You drop your kids off at school and then you might go hang out with your friends at the mosque because they have a lounge area, like a coffee shop, Ms. Sarsauer said. It's one of those kinds of places that's just not like you go pray at the mosque and you leave. Mr. Hussain, addressing reporters in a park late Monday afternoon, said, My community is mourning. This is something we have never expected to take place, but at the same time, the religious intolerance and the hate, unfortunately, that exist in our nation is unprecedented. All of us who are responsible for spreading the culture of tolerance, all of us, we are responsible for spreading the culture of tolerance, the culture of love. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the front section of the New York Times on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Trump's special envoy to Greenland receives a cold welcome from locals. After President Trump's threats to seize the island, Governor Jeff Landry's offers of MAGA hats and chocolate chip cookies fall flat. This is an article by Maya Tikali, reported from Nuuk, Greenland's capital, and Jeffrey Gettleman from London. President Trump's special envoy to Greenland, Governor Jeff Landry of Louisiana, came to the island this week on a self-proclaimed goodwill mission to make a bunch of friends. So far, he has not found many. Within hours of landing on Sunday in Nuuk, Greenland's capital, Mr. Landry was touring the town in a cold drizzle when one Greenlander gave his entourage the finger. He offered some MAGA hats to Greenlandic children. Several shook their heads. He even told some kids that if they came to his mansion in Louisiana, in Louisiana. They could have all the chocolate chip cookies you can eat. The next day, Jens Frederick Nielsen, Greenland's prime minister, expressed his discomfort with the whole thing. We have our red lines, he told DR, Denmark's public broadcaster, and no matter how many chocolate chip cookies we get, we are not going to change them. When asked about that later, Mr. Landry said there's only one line and it's red, white, and blue. Mr. Landry's high-profile visit, his first since being appointed in December as Mr. Trump's point person in Greenland, comes at an exceedingly awkward time. Confidential negotiations over Greenland's future have been unfolding in Washington, and officials have told the New York Times that Greenland's leaders are wary of the direction in which the talks are headed. The United States is insisting on a much bigger role in Greenland, perhaps not as drastic as seizing the island as Mr. Trump has threatened, but with major oversight over the country's economic and security affairs. The Trump administration wants effective veto power over any sizable investment deals to box out competitors like Russia and China, officials said. And the American officials are pushing to insert a forever clause into a decades-old military agreement so that if Greenland ever becomes independent, U.S. troops will remain on the island. Mr. Trump has said he needs Greenland for national security reasons, and there is no doubt that the Arctic island is a huge piece of the North American security picture. It is more than 1,500 miles long and 600 miles wide and sits high up in the Arctic Circle, a region that is increasingly contested by China, Russia, the United States, and Europe. But the way Mr. Trump has constantly threatened the island as semi-autonomous territory of Denmark and vowed to get it one way or the other has frightened and angered and alienated many Greenlanders. Greenlandic officials are watching Mr. Landry's trip closely and have taken issue with an American doctor accompanying the governor to assess the medical situation. The Danish territory's healthcare system, which is publicly supported, is one of the top reasons Greenlanders cite for not wanting to join the United States. They fear losing their Scandinavian-style social net under an American system that to them stands for vast inequality and dysfunction. Greenlanders are not experimental subjects in a geopolitical project, said Greenland's health minister, Anna Wangenheim. As Mr. Landry was sightseeing on Sunday, several onlookers scowled at him. They should fix their own country first, said Hansen, a homemaker. They need to get out, said her friend Viva Nilsson. To Nuuk's residents, the trip seemed tone deaf. Mr. Landry's delegation carried cardboard boxes stuffed with red MAGA hats, but few residents wanted them. Greenlandic entrepreneurs have made their own version, red baseball caps that read, "Make America Go Away." Mr. Landry's tour guide was Jorgen Boesen, a former bricklayer who has emerged as the #1 Trump fan on the island, but is reviled by many locals. Traitor and shame on you, residents yelled as he walked past with Mr. Landry. Mr. Landry would not discuss the negotiations, and his visit was timed to catch a business conference that started on Tuesday in Nuuk. I'm going to try to make as many friends, see as many things, talk to folks and see if there are additional opportunities where the U.S. could engage economically and certainly create opportunities for Greenlanders as well, he told reporters. American investors, including allies of Mr. Trump, have been scouring the island for deals in water, minerals, and energy. A former Green Beret who served as an advisor during Mr. Trump's first term even floated a plan to build a gigantic data center on a remote fjord. The Trump administration is clearly expanding operations in Greenland and reopening old military bases to bring in more troops for Arctic training exercises. This week, the United States will upgrade its consulate, moving from a little red house on the outskirts of Nuuk to one of the few office buildings in town. Mr. Landry said he spoke to Mr. Trump over the weekend, and the president encouraged him to make a bunch of friends. When asked by journalists what kind of friends, Mr. Landry replied, all kinds of friends. But in an emotional speech at the business conference on Tuesday, a young Greenlandic woman expressed a different sentiment. Trump wants to buy a country, our country, she said. But what about us? Would he buy us too? Justices hint at strains as Supreme Court comes under scrutiny. Traveling across the country, justices defend the role of the court even as strained relations among its members emerge in writing and remarks. an article by Anne E. Marimo and Aishvarya Kavi. In Pennsylvania earlier this month, Chief Justice John G. Roberts Jr. insisted the public is misguided to think of Supreme Court justices as political actors. In Florida this week, Justice Clarence Thomas, who has served since 1991, waxed poetic about his deep friendships with justices from an earlier era, saying there's nothing negative about his relations with the newer crop of colleagues, while acknowledging the court is now different. And in Washington on Monday night, Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson criticized the court for disrupting its normal practices through quick-turn, often unexplained emergency orders and warned that the public loses confidence in the court when its decisions appear political. As the justices have traveled the country this month for public appearances, a traditional part of the court scheduled after finishing oral arguments for the term, they have seemed intensely aware of public debate about their relationship with each other and the court's own legitimacy. It is so important for the public to perceive us as neutral, nonpartisan, because public confidence is really all the judiciary has. That's our currency, Justice Jackson said during a wide-ranging conversation with a federal judge from South Carolina at the American Law Institute's annual meeting in Washington. It's incumbent upon us to do things, to act in ways that shore up public confidence. Justice Jackson's comments hint at what appear to be frayed relations among some of the justices as the court prepares to issue its final rulings, many in deeply consequential cases, before the term ends in late June or early July. The tensions come as the court is being pummeled with criticism from across the political spectrum. President Trump is still fuming on social media over the court's decision to invalidate his sweeping tariffs and musing about the likelihood of a major ruling against his effort to end the guarantee of birthright citizenship. The president has called out two of his own nominees, Justices Neil M. Gorsuch and Amy Coney Barrett, for voting against his tariffs, saying they should have been loyal to the person that appointed them. From the left, civil rights organizations and Democrats have decried the court's significant weakening of the landmark Voting Rights Act last month. The decision has set off Republican-led redistricting efforts to break up majority black districts across the South and prompted sharp exchanges between some of the justices. Soon after the ruling, Chief Justice Roberts defended the court during a judicial conference in Hershey, Pennsylvania, and pushed back on what he said was a misunderstanding about its role. At a very basic level, people think we're making policy decisions, Chief Roberts said. I think they view us as purely political actors, which I don't think is an accurate understanding of what we do. Justice Barrett made a similar point during a book talk at the George W. Bush Presidential Center in Dallas. I think the casual reader about the Supreme Court or its decisions might have the impression that we're just kind of up there, politicians in robes. That's not how the court functions, and I think if you listen to some oral arguments, you see what the court's about, she said. The decision in the Louisiana matter was 6-3 and divided among ideological lines, as is frequently the case in the most controversial rulings. In response, Justice Elena Kagan stoically read parts of her lengthy dissent aloud from the bench, a rare moment for the liberal justice known for seeking compromise, signaling her strong disagreement. The decision, she said, provided the latest chapter in the majority's now completed demolition of the Voting Rights Act. Justices Sonia Sotomayor and Jackson signed on to the dissent. A follow-up ruling expediting the Louisiana decision in a way that allowed Republicans in the state to quickly redraw its maps ahead of the midterms led to sharp accusations from Justice Jackson that the majority was playing politics. The court unshackles itself from both constraints today and dives into the fray, and just like that, those principles give way to power, Justice Jackson wrote then, on behalf of only herself. That prompted a strong response from Justice Samuel Alito, Jr., who called Justice Jackson's assertions as a groundless and utterly irresponsible charge. He was joined by Justices Thomas and Gorsuch. It has been Justice Jackson who has been the most willing to criticize the court, increasingly alone. On Monday, she offered anew a sharp critique of her conservative colleagues' handlings of a series of brief emergency orders that have allowed Trump many of the Trump administration's policies to take effect on a temporary basis. There are real world consequences that are occurring, and no one really has a clear sense of why it's happening or what the court's reasoning is. So I just think we can and should be better, she told Judge Richard Gergel of the U.S. District Court in South Carolina. Even when the justices are ideologically divided and exchange sharp words in their written opinions, they like to highlight in public appearances their ability to get along despite substantive disagreements. I'm sorry. Justice Sotomayor, a Democratic nominee, and Justice Barrett, a Republican nominee, headlined a series of joint appearances 2 years ago to make the point. Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, a liberal, and Justice Antonin Scalia, a conservative, had a storied odd couple friendship. In interviews for his new children's book, Heroes of 1776, Justice Gorsuch has insisted his colleagues get along, emphasizing the court's record of issuing unanimous opinions in about 40% of its cases, despite the justices' differing judicial philosophies. We're able to talk to one another and listen to one another and find common ground a surprising amount of the time, he told David French, an opinion columnist for the New York Times. I think that's a miracle. In a separate interview on Fox News, Justice Gorsuch said he and his colleagues have a good time together disagreeing. But at times, some of the justices have appeared to acknowledge that they are not particularly close. During his appearance in Florida last week, Justice Thomas reminisced, as he often does in public remarks, about how much closer the justices were in his early years on the bench. The friendships and the bonds were much, much deeper than I'm able to form now, he said during an interview at a golf resort north of Miami with Kasdan Mitchell, an attorney who was once his law clerk. The differences may be in part generational, Justice Thomas explained. All four of the most recent nominees, Justices Jackson, Barrett, Gorsuch, and Brett M. Kavanaugh, were young law clerks at the Supreme Court when Justice Thomas was already on the bench. The relationships are different, he said, but he added they aren't negative in any way. You've been listening to a reading of articles and features from the May 19th issue of the front section of the New York Times. We read from the front section of the New York Times every Sunday at 1 p.m. Your reader has been Patrice. I thank you for listening, and I hope you have a wonderful day.